craziest butterfly effect that happened to you because of a small decision you made? It was November, and the rain was coming down like the world was ending. I was walking home from my crappy job at the electronics store when I realized I'd forgotten my umbrella again. By the time I was 3 blocks from home, I was soaked through my jacket, water dripping off my hair into my eyes. I ducked into the first place I could find, this tiny bookstore squeezed between a laundromat and a pizza joint. The sign outside was faded and half the letters were missing. Inside smelled like old paper and coffee that had been sitting too long. There was this older guy behind the counter, maybe 60-something, with thick glasses and a cardigan that looked like it came from the 70s. He looked up when the bell jingled and gave me this warm smile. "Rough day out there," he said, nodding toward the window where rain was still hammering against the glass. "Yeah, forgot my umbrella," I said, shaking water off my jacket onto his floor. "Sorry about the mess." "Don't worry about it. Paul's the name. Take your time drying off." I wasn't much of a reader back then. I spent most of my free time playing video games or watching Netflix. But I started wandering around his store while I waited for the rain to let up. He had everything crammed in there. Fiction, history, cookbooks, random magazines from the 90s. Paul started talking to me about the books, asking if I liked mysteries or science fiction. When I told him I didn't really read much, he didn't judge me or anything. Instead, he pulled this beat-up paperback off the shelf. "Try this one," he said. "It's about a guy who thinks his life is boring until he finds out his neighbor is a spy." We ended up talking for 45 minutes. He told me about how he'd owned the store for 23 years, how he'd bought it after his wife died because he needed something to keep his hands busy. He was lonely, you could tell, but he was genuinely interested in what I had to say, even though I was just some random 24-year-old kid who sold cell phone cases for a living. When the rain finally stopped, I bought the book even though I wasn't sure I'd read it. Something about the way he'd recommended it made me want to at least try. The next Friday after work, I found myself thinking about Paul and his little store. I don't know why, but I stopped by on my way home. He was there, organizing a shelf of romance novels, and his face lit up when he saw me. "Did you read it?" he asked immediately. I had, actually. Stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing it because I couldn't put it down. We talked about the book for an hour, and he recommended 3 more. Before I knew it, stopping by Paul's store every Friday became my routine. He'd have coffee ready. Terrible coffee. But he was so proud of it that I drank it anyway. We talk about books, sure, but also about life. He told me stories about the neighborhood from before I moved there, about customers who'd become friends over the years, about his late wife who used to help him run the place. I started looking forward to those Friday visits more than anything else in my week. Paul became like the grandfather I'd never had, always asking how my week went, remembering details about my job drama or the girl I was trying to work up the courage to ask out. 4 months into our friendship, I showed up on a Friday and the store was dark. The open sign wasn't flipped, which was weird because Paul was always there by 3 o'clock. I knocked on the glass door and peered inside but couldn't see anything. Something felt wrong. Paul was the most reliable person I'd ever met. He opened that store every single day except Sundays, rain or shine. I tried calling the number painted on the window, but it just rang and rang. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I walked around to the alley behind the building and found a back door. It was unlocked. Inside, I called out for Paul, and that's when I heard this weak groaning sound coming from behind the counter. I rushed over and found him on the floor, clutching his chest, his face gray and sweaty. "Paul, what happened?" "Heart," he whispered. "Can't breathe." I called 911 immediately and stayed with him, holding his hand and talking to him to keep him conscious until the paramedics arrived. They worked on him right there in the store before loading him into the ambulance. At the hospital, the doctor told me that if I hadn't found him when I did, Paul would have died alone on that floor. He'd been there for almost 6 hours after his heart attack hit. Paul spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and I visited him every day after work. When he finally came home, he was different, frailer, more tired, but also more grateful for everything. He kept thanking me for saving his life, saying I was the son he never had. A year later, Paul passed away peacefully in his sleep.